Hello. So welcome along to today's lunchtime stream. Hopefully you can all hear me and everything is working from that point of view. Couple of housekeeping things I wanted to point out before we jump into what we're going to be looking at today. The first one is, and I know he's in the chat room just now, I wanted to thank Maurice. I completely missed it in the last stream that I did, but Maurice quite generously gave me a cheer, which, or did I already do this? No, I don't think I did. No, not on a stream. I don't think I've mentioned it on a stream, so I wanted to mention it on a stream. So Maurice used the cheer function in Twitch, which gave me some bits. I don't really fully understand what this means yet. I'm a complete Twitch noob, but it was very generous of him anyway, so I wanted to say thank you. So I've done that, and I will know if it happens again to hopefully keep an eye out for it. But one thing I do have to do in my Twitch setup is to enable alerts so that things like that become more easy to see, because in terms of what I'm doing just now, I'm monitoring lots of different things, so having an alert pop up I think would help with it in that regard. So hello to everyone in the chat room. I want to figure out your first name, who's just tweeted there or just mentioned there. So let's it's Frank, right? We met at MVP Summit, I believe. We were in a VsCode session, and we had a quick chat about a few things. There we go, perfect. And you were on Tyler's stream last night, that where we were talking about upgrading the Cake Bootstrapper to be cross-platform compatible. So yeah, thank you for coming along. Okay, so today's stream is continuing this effort that is currently underway, which is to update some Cake Addins to the latest version of Cake. So for those of you that joined the Monday stream, I had a session where I was updating this thing called Cake.Recipe. So Cake.Recipe is opinionated, convention based set of scripts for building stuff with Cake, and a lot of the add-ins that I maintain and some of the other ones under the Cake-Contrib organization make use of Cake.Recipe. So what happened on Monday night, or rather more specifically Tuesday night, is I pushed out a new version of Cake.Recipe, which is 1.0.0. So it's the first kind of official release, if you like, because the way that most add-ins currently consume Cake.Recipe is that they use this, which is the most recent pre-release version that's pushed to MyGet. Now, the problem with that is, now that we're at a 1.0 release, we fully intend to break some stuff. That was the whole point in getting to a 1.0 release, so that we can actually break some of the internal APIs and also the public APIs of Cake.Recipe, because there are good reasons for doing that. But one of the things that we now need to do is to go through and figure out all the usages of Cake.Recipe and encourage them to pin to that 1.0.0 release. And the other part of the work that's ongoing just now is to update to the latest version of Cake. So Cake pushed out a new version, which is 0.33, and we want to recompile the add-ins so that it uses the most recent version of Cake, so that everyone's up to date. So that's kind of probably going to be my ongoing topic for these Friday lunchtime streams. So let's just jump in. The one that I'm going to look at now is another one that I'm the kind of primary maintainer on, which is Cake.Gitter. The reason that I'm doing this one is because Matthias, dev lead, has already put in a PR for a lot of the changes that I want to do. So it saves me having to do some of that work. So that's obviously a good thing. So what Matthias has been working on is this issue 38. So let's just explain a little bit about what's going on here. So Jericho, who is a Cake community member, has created this thing called the Add-in Discoverer. And part of what the Add-in Discoverer does is it actually looks at Cake add-in repositories and the current state of them, and then makes recommendations based on the current state and where it wants to get to. So it's a completely automated process that he runs, and he'll create an issue, and he's actually looking to move forward with that to actually create a PR to fix some of these issues. But for now, it creates an issue. So in this issue, it's indicated that we need to update to the latest version of Cake, which we knew about. There's a suggestion that we change the package icon URL to be a different URL. Mainly that's because if we look at that new spec file just now, actually we look at the changes that Matthias has made. The current new spec uses an icon from rawgit.com. Some of you might know that rawgit.com has actually closed down now. It's not going to function anymore going forward. So we're switching from rawgit to JSDeliver. And so that's one of the things that Matthias has done here. And the other one is... no, that's small actually. So that's in terms of what the add-in discoverer picks up on just now, that's it. So those are the kind of there are other ones that it picks up on, but obviously the current state of this Cake.Gitter one is such that these are the things it's tripped up on. So Matthias has identified, or rather submitted a PR that fixes all of those things. So looking at this, we can see that he's gone from 28 to 33, which is good. He's gone from, in terms of what Cake builds, in terms of what version of Cake we use to build this Cake.Addin, we're bumping from 30 to 32.1, which is the one that we need. He's changed that icon URL, and he's pinned to a specific version of Cake.Recipe. So all of this looks good to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and approve this. And we'll get this merged in. And then there are a couple of other things that I want to change on top of this while we're pushing out this next version. But let's just go ahead and get that merged in just now. We'll have a look at version 38, and we will assign this to a milestone. So the next version of Cake.Gitter is 11. So let's go ahead and create that and assign it. And this is overall improvements, because we're bumping things and moving them along that shouldn't adversely impact on anyone. So we'll make it an improvement. And let's go ahead and fetch those changes down locally, because I'm going to want to continue that work that Matthias has done. So let's go ahead and fetch that from upstream and rebase my current develop onto the top of that. And then let's just push that to my fork here. See, I know what you're saying, Kim, but I don't know. I really don't. Because, and the reason I'll say that, I'll explain a little bit, I'll explain why I say that. So, anyone who is consuming Cake.Gitter right now, the current version, the 0.10.0 release of Cake.Gitter, and if they bump to a newer version of Cake, they're going to get warnings. And they're going to get a warning that says that Cake.Gitter is targeting an old version of Cake assemblies, and they might want to reach out to the maintainers to update that. So Cake.Gitter is going to continue to work in a new version of Cake, but there are going to be warnings. So what we're doing here, with no functionality changes, is we're bumping to a new version of Cake that, without making any changes to the code. So I don't really see how that's a breaking change, unless what you're saying is that if they haven't pinned to a specific version of Cake.Gitter and they get a new version and they're on an old version of Cake, then potentially that will break. But at the same time, they haven't pinned to a specific version of Cake and or Cake Addin. So I don't know if technically it is. But they wouldn't. I don't know. I see what you're saying. I'm willing to change it. I mean, I'm willing to change this to be breaking. I'm just not sure if I fully am on board with that. Will the add-in download and use the new? Short answer, no. The add-in uses the version of Cake that is being executed. That it's being executed with. So the scenario that Kim is referring to here is that if someone has pinned to, let's say, version 31 of Cake for running the build, but they haven't pinned to a specific version of Cake.Gitter in this case, then the next time they run that build and those add-ins are resolved, they'll get the new version running under the old version of Cake, and that will cause a break. That it won't be able to load those assemblies. So from that perspective, it's a break. But if they were pinning the Cake add-in versions, then they wouldn't see the break, and it would be a knowing increase, a bump in increase in their systems. So I'll leave it as breaking just now, because I don't disagree, but I also don't agree. I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence on this one. But anyway, so that's what that was. And what I wanted to do was a couple of other changes in this area. So let's just close this one out and go back to here. So from a complete OCD point of view, I'm also in the process of changing this setup.cake, the name of this setup.cake file in my add-ins to be recipe.cake. So it better illustrates that cake.recipe is being used. So I'm changing that to recipe.cake. And what I'll obviously need to do is that any places that was making use of the setup.cake name, I'm going to want to change that to be to recipe.cake. And I also want to, while I'm here, change this appvar cache level, because we found that it wasn't clearing the cache properly because it was incorrectly set up. So this one, I think, has what I want. So let's grab this, copy that. So what we're saying here is, so this is an appvar specific thing, that appvar will cache certain folders for us. So in this case, the source packages folder and the tools folder. But we also want to invalidate that cache when there are no identified changes in some files. So by only clearing the cache when there's a change to the recipe.cake file, or the one that was the setup.cake file, we would miss the ones that would flow through from a bump in the packages.config file. So I wanted to add that one back in there. So setup.cake, which is what I was calling it, I'm going to change that to be recipe.cake, and then in the bash equivalent for the bootstrapper, I'm going to change that, and that's just a solution file that obviously was bringing them in as well. Recipe.cake. It's an interesting question. So Kim in the chat room was there asking, should they be cleaned when the build.ps1 file is changed as well, perhaps? In future case, that everything is changed to use a different bootstrapper. In future case, yes, no, you're probably right. So what kind of Kim is alluding to there is, in the next incarnation of the Cake bootstrappers, or the Cake recommended bootstrappers, things are probably going to be done differently. So the bootstrapper is going to potentially hold certain version numbers. So right now in a Cake project, we recommend pinning to the Cake version using this packages.config file in the tools folder. That's potentially going to change. So they may end up in the bootstrapper, but they may also end up, and this is one of the questions that's still up for debate, is it may actually end up in this cake.config file that's kind of seldom used at the minute, but that contains some kind of higher level settings for Cake instantiation and the running of Cake. So it's potential that some of those version numbers will end up in there, but it's still an ongoing discussion. So for now, I'm not going to put the build.ps1 file into my appvar cache. but we can come back to that. Okay, so that was all of the setup.cake renames. So let's just go ahead and commit those. So this is just going to be maintenance one. Rename setup.cake to recipe.cake, so it is clearer that cake.recipe is being used. Okay, so that was that one. And the other thing that I wanted to change was a couple of settings in the new spec file for Cake.Gitter. So right now, this new spec file is using the license URL. So the way that NuGet encourages the usage of the license URL nowadays is not the same as this anymore. So if we go back to Cake.Twitter, where I've already made this change, and look at its new spec file, then there is a new license element within the new spec where you can just specify MIT and it will do all the rest of the things that's needed. So I want to change that one, and I also want to pull in the second new attribute, which is the repository attribute. That is a link back to the source control repository that this add-in is written in. So I'm going to take both of those and I'm going to stick those into here. And then I'm going to update this to say Cake.Gitter rather than Cake.Twitter. Okay, so that's those things changed. So let's go back and commit those. So I'm just going to make this a maintenance commit again and update new spec metadata with new recommendations. Let's just say the NuGet team. Okay, so we'll save that. And I think those were the only things that I wanted to change, but let's just quickly check to see what other commits I did on Cake.Twitter, which is where I've updated these things most recently. So let's have a look at some of these commits and make sure that we've done everything. Let's have a look at these ones as well. Yeah, these are the most recent commits. So we have pinned to that, which we did. We changed the license and the icon URL, which we did. Matthias made that change, which was to pin to a specific version of cake.recipe. That was the package references, and yeah, that's fine because we've updated that now. That was there, and that is that one. So I think I'm good. I think it's the only things that I wanted to do there. So let's go ahead and run this build locally, just to make sure that we haven't broken anything locally. And then if it works, we can push this up and create a release ready for pushing up to NuGet. So any questions in the chat room while that's building about anything I'm doing and why? Happy to take those while this is happening. There is an ongoing effort from a few community members now to go through this process of updating the Cake add-in. So there's a Sean in the community, Gitfool. He's went through the top 20 add-ins now on NuGet.org, and he's put pull requests in for essentially what I've just done on my own repository here. And we're working through some of those in the Cake-Contrib organization to get them pulled in, and working with the other Cake community members to get those updated as well. So it's not a quick task. I mean, there's over 200 add-ins now for Cake, and this process of getting them updated is it's not difficult to do, but there's a process there in terms of creating the PRs, getting the maintainers to pull them in, that sort of thing. And I've just had a notification come through that another Cake community member by the name of Glenn, he's just pushed out an update to the Cake pin NuGet dependency add-in. I was chatting to him just before this stream started with some suggestions on how we could get his build to work because it was failing. So I'm hoping that this is all going to work. And if it does, we can get the release out, and we can start on another add-in. And I've had the suggestion a couple of times now that I should go and do the Cake.VsCode add-in from Maurice. So I'm going to go ahead and do that one next, I think, so that I can get that one out of the way. So this looks like it's progressing well. There's some beeps coming through. Oh, I'm going to close something down here. Okay, so that worked. So I'm going to push these two changes up to upstream, and that will kick off a build on AppBear. And then I'm going to push these also to my fork, just so that they remain in sync. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this issue, and make sure it's on the 0.11 and so on. So I'm going to check out a new branch, which is the process that I follow. I'm following Git flow, and I'm going to say that this is going to be the 0.11 release, and I'm going to take that from the develop branch. And what that will allow me to do is to run another target in my Cake script, which is the release notes target, and that will generate a set of release notes. No, it won't. I know why that won't, but I thought I'd done that one already. Okay, so the reason that's happening is there's an older version of... No, I'm a liar. I wonder. That's exactly what I was going to do, Kim. But I thought the bootstrappers now understood both versions of that, but perhaps it doesn't. I think that's one of the things that's on the list, to make sure that bootstrappers understand both the PowerShell version, which is what this is, as well as potentially additional arguments get passed in. Yeah, you're right, Kim. So if I do this one, the reason that I'm in the habit of doing that now is because I predominantly use my Mac now as my main machine, and I use the -- target equals release notes there. So this is building 0.11.0. Oh, that's something I'm going to want to check. Just thought of one other thing that I need to put on this list of changes that I want to make. Oh no, it's already there. So this should run git version true. This is a build parameter that's passed into Cake.Recipe because historically Cake.Recipe made use of git version, and git version didn't run very well on operating systems other than Windows. So Cake.Recipe made a decision that said, if I'm on Windows, run git version. If I'm not on Windows, don't do it. So there was a build parameter added to force the running of git version on other operating systems, because it now works there. So I wanted to make sure that that was added in, but it is. So that worked. That worked, and now I should have a set of release notes created for this upcoming release. So this one's only got one thing in it, which was that. Oh, did it not work? Oh, hold on. It did work, but it didn't run the. It wasn't able to run it because it's missing the credentials. I was convinced I added those in. But obviously not. So I'm going to need to close off my screen and add those credentials in, because as much as I trust everyone in the chat room, I don't really want you to see all my environment variables, because I've made that mistake. I've made that mistake already, and it wasn't fun. So let me go and add those in. Give me just a couple of minutes. I will come back in a sec. Okay, I'm back. So I have just added those environment variables that I believe is necessary to run that part of the build. So I'm going to go back to where I had that code open, which was in Cake.Gitter, and then I'm going to run that target again, which is the release nodes target, and see what happens this time. Let's see what happens. Cake.Gitter. Release nodes. Okay, that looks more promising. So if I now go over here and look for that release, then we should see this there. So it's just got that one break and change issue that we added in. So I can go ahead and now check out my master branch, do a git merge of that release branch into the master branch, and I can push that up. We'll push that up to upstream, and we'll push it to origin as well, so that everything's in sync. That will kick off. That'll kick off another appver build, so we can actually start looking at some of these. ci.appver.com, and if we have a look in Cake-Contrib, then there's the Cake.Gitter one running just now. So with that done, I can finish off the the git flow process and go back to develop. In this case, there should be nothing to merge because we didn't make any changes on that release branch, but we'll just go through that process just to make sure. And then, assuming that all of that is happy, then we'll go ahead and delete that release branch because we don't need it anymore. Okay, so with that done, let's go over to, let's just go in here, gitter.im, so that we can see that this works when the release happens. So the release that I mentioned just at the start of the stream was this pin NuGet dependency, so that there is the one that's just been pushed out. 4:21. I wonder what time zone my machine's in, because it's not 4:31 here in the UK. I don't know what's going on there. Let's wait for this to finish. And if this finishes, we will publish that release on GitHub, which will kick off the build, and then that will push out that new version to NuGet. So let's just get this underway. Just checking my Slack feed, it's got a few other notifications coming through. And then the next one that we are going to be looking at is by request. The one that we're going to be looking at is VsCode. So I have another add-in that helps with the execution of the command line utility that is called VSCE, which is for packaging and publishing VsCode extensions. And I use this for some of the VsCode extensions that I have out there. So what we can do is we can clone this locally, because we're going to need to start making some changes. So let's just grab this while we're waiting for that build to finish. So this is my fork of that one. So let's go up a level, and we're going to do git clone of that guy. And then we can cd into Cake.VsCode. And then if we go back, then we'll get the fork, or the original repository. That happened before. That didn't populate for some reason, but when I refresh it, it did. So this is going to be git remote add upstream to the source repository, which is there. So Maurice is saying, I like that notification change that Kim suggested. So I think what you're referring to there is, if we go back to here, then in a previous stream, it was pointed out that the original Gitter message and the original Twitter message said, a new version of this add-in's just been released, click here to get it. The problem with that message, and it might no longer be the case with this one, is that it was a lie. It was a lie. The actual version wouldn't be there until the package indexing finished on NuGet.org. So in the Monday stream, we made a slight modification to the message that says that it's just been released and this will be available when the packaging indexing is complete. So just a little bit more of a complete message, and it indicates that there may well be a slight delay in getting that, making that available. But in this one, this happened 13 minutes ago, and then the package indexing must be quite quick today because it is there, it is available, so you could go ahead and download that add-in and pull it into your build scripts if you needed it. So that build succeeded, so on that basis I'm happy to go in and edit this release, and let's get this 0.11.0 release out the door. So let's go ahead and click the publish button, which will trigger another AppBear build, but this time with a tag, and then the addition of that tag is what causes the deployments to actually happen. So we'll see here that the SHA here is exactly the same, but the difference being that this has got a tag on it and this doesn't. So it will cause the deployments to happen. So while that's happening, I'm going to make sure that my fork is up to date with the upstream, which it looks like it is, and we'll do the same on the master branch. Git checkout master. Git checkout track origin master. Git rebase upstream master. Okay, perfect. So this local repository is up to date as well. So we can start doing stuff. So that stuff for this one will be under the guise of, so again, that that Cake Addin discoverer that Jericho has created has created an issue in this repository as well, in the exact same way as it did on Cake.Gitter. And these are the suggestions for what needs to happen to bring this repository into line with the best practices that are out there just now for Cake Addins. So we can start going through that process while we are waiting for this build to finish. So let's have a look. Let's go and get a code instance open with this code base, and we can start looking at what we need to do. So the first thing here in my tools folder is I'm going to need to update this. So I'm going to want to take that to 32.1. And then in my setup.cake, I'm going to want to change this to no longer come from myget. I want it to come from the default NuGet source, which is going to be there. I'm going to want to lose the pre-release flag. Oh, that's too many deletes there. Yeah. And then I want to pin to a specific version, and that version is going to be 1.0.0. Okay. And then in terms of the source code changes in my csproj file, then I'm going to be referencing 28 here. So I'm going to want to bump that to 33. And then the same in the tests project, which is going to be here. So I've got a couple of bumps here. Now, it's entirely likely that there's actually some updates for some of these other dependencies here. I'm not going to do that as part of this change, but that's something that will come for free when I start adding Dependabot onto all of these add-ins that I have in the Cake-Contrib organization. I know that that's something, I'm just looking at the chat room, I know that's something that Kim has been adding on to his add-ins that are in Cake-Contrib organization and the ones that he has out with Cake-Contrib. For those of you who don't know, Dependabot's amazing. Dependabot will look at your CS project file or your old school packages.config file, and it will make pull requests into your repositories when a new version has been found for that dependency. And it's very clever in the sense that you can tell it to ignore specific dependencies. It's being worked on that you can group dependencies together so that they can collect them into one PR rather than multiple PRs. And it's amazing. It really is. The net effect is that you get lots of pull requests added, and you have to kind of go in and add them, but you can have it automatically merge the PRs as well. I haven't quite got to that point yet of trusting it to that level. I just have it create the PRs, not to merge them, but it's something you definitely can do. So Kim's pointing out that build succeeded. So if we go over to the Gitter room, we'll see that new Cake.Gitter add-in has just been released. But if we go over here and click on this link, then it's a lie because 0.11's not there yet, but it will be once the package and indexing completes. So that messaging update is definitely useful there. Okay, so going back, it should be. So I think what Marisa is referring to in the chat room there is that it should be available for Cake Addins as well. Are we still talking about Dependabot there? Is that what you were talking about, Maurice? Let's just check. Yep. So, yes, it should, and there is actually a PR into Dependabot for updating Cake add-ins modules and tools that you define in your preprocessor directives. So, the same community member, Sean, who is doing lots of PRs for updating Cake.Addins to the latest version of Cake. He's also put in a PR to Dependabot to have it look at preprocessor directives to have it update those as well as part of the cycle that it goes through. And it's currently waiting on the maintainer of Dependabot to take a look at that and see if any additional changes are needed there. So that's definitely something. There we go. So Kim's found the link in the chat room there if you're interested. I commented on that issue or that PR a couple of days ago to see what the state of it was. But yeah, Gray hasn't quite come back yet with any update on that. But it's definitely something that we're hoping to get added in soon, so that support will be there. Okay, so where did we get to? So we had updated all of those things. We pinned to there. We need to change the license URL. Not the license URL, the icon URL. So let's go back to the recommendations. Now I know that this is potentially a contentious issue. So the recommendation that's coming from the add-in discoverer is to use a non-shad version of the link to the URL. So I'm not going to get into it. There's two ways. So if we actually look here, if we look at how the Rogit URL was being used, then it was Rogit to the repository and then to the actual commit that contained that change or the addition of the icon and then the path to it. So the argument there is that if the path structure in the target repository changes, so if it was no longer in the PNG folder and it went to icons / whatever, then this URL would always work. Whereas this one that I'm away to put into here, if I paste this in, then this has the potential to fall foul of that path changing. But the arguments for both sides are valid. One says that if the path does change, we have to get everyone to update anyway. Whereas if the icon itself changes, we can just clear the cache on JS Deliver and it'll automatically pull it through. So it's there's argument for both sides. I'm going to go with the recommendations here, but you can choose to ignore that recommendation if you prefer to use the git commit version of the URL. Absolutely. So I'm going to go back here to Cake.Twitter so I can grab the additional changes to the new spec, which are for the license and for the repository. The suggestion to do these things is something that is going in to the add-in discoverer, but it's not quite there yet, I believe. So I'm going to replace this license URL with that, and I'm going to change Cake.Twitter to be, which one are we doing now? VSCode. VSCode. And I think that is all of those things done. So we have, I don't know what happened there. So we updated that, and we updated the icon URL to be that. So this is going to be issue 33. So those are the changes, and we're going to associate these with 33. Changes based on audit, update to latest. I can't spell. Latest cake and cake.recipe. Recipe update to update new spec metadata. Go ahead and do those. We'll do that as a separate commit, so it goes against this one, and we will pull this into the next release, which is 0.11 here also. And as per the conversation that we just had, we'll say that this is a breaking change, and that's going to go in. And then the other changes that I want to make are for my own OCD. So that's this is going to change to recipe.cake, and we'll search for setup.cake. So this one we need to change in the same way that we did before as well. So this is going to be tools packages.config. Now I think I'm right in saying that that tools folder is capital, isn't it? It is. So let's just guard against any problems there. Well, if we were to start using the Linux version of AppBear, and let's change, go away, debug console. You've done that to me twice. Change this to be recipe as well. And we'll change this to be recipe. And then the two files in here as well. Recipe and recipe. Perfect. For those that don't use MIT in their license, here is the, oh, that's a good link, Kim. Grab the link there so I can bring it up. Let's do. So what Kim's pointing out here is that in most of the projects that I run, I use MIT as the license of choice, but this column here is what you would put into the license element in the new spec or in your CSproj file, if that's what your preference is, for whatever license you are attributing to your source code. That's a good link, actually, Kim. I didn't know about that one, so thank you for that. So this was me making changes. So this was a maintenance commit, maintenance update project files setup.cake to recipe.cake, and What else did we do? Appware configuration. So let's go ahead and do that. Sure. And I'm going to run the build locally again to make sure that we haven't broken anything. And if this works, we should have just enough time to get the release of this one out before I can go and get some lunch. And Kim's saying if the license isn't listed on that web page, you'll need to include the license and use the license type. Yeah, so that's the other part of this is NuGet in this kind of refactoring are allowing the embedding of a license file directly into the nupkeg that you can generate. But in order for that to flow through, you have to specifically address to where that license file is in the nupkeg. And that's what Kim is pointing out there, that you can embed the license file, but you then need to provide the path to where it is in that nupkeg so that it can flow through into NuGet.org or whatever gallery it's being shipped to. So some good information there. Unfortunately, it didn't look like your... is it because you didn't include a closing tag on the... I can see it in chatty, but what's coming through on chat on the video isn't quite the right format. So I wonder if it doesn't like the fact that you tried to put Markdown into the chat window there, Kim. Yeah, that didn't work either. So I can see the closing. I can see the closing element in chatty, but it's not coming through on that window over there. So I'm not. Well, let me. How would I do this? I could. Oh, let's just do this. Will this work? Gets censored probably because of the brackets, possibly. So let's pull this up. So for anyone that's interested, I'll go this way. Then what Kim's saying is that you can provide a path here to an embedded file that you put within the nupkeg, and that's how you would attribute that in the license.mt file. Attribute that in the license element of the new spec file. And then he's also provided a link to the actual docs that go into some more detail of that. So definitely have a read through that if this is something that you need. So let's do this. I'm going to check out a branch called release 0.11.0 from develop. I'm going to run the target that is the release notes, which will allow me to generate. Did I close that issue? No, I didn't. So I'm going to close this issue and then run that release notes. That will generate the release notes. And if all that works, then I'll do the merge to master. And then from there, we can get things released again. So I've got a list going on down here of all the add-ins that I need to update. That's what I'm looking down at. So I've just ticked off Cake.Gitter. And if this works, which it did, so git checkout master, git merge no ff of that release branch, git push upstream because we're happy, and we'll push that to origin as well. Git push origin, and if that works, we can flip back to the develop branch. And again, we didn't make any changes on that release branch, but we will walk through the process. If I can type git checkout develop, nope, I can't. Git merge, git merge no ff on the release branch. There'll be no changes, so we can do a branch delete of that one, so that we tidy that up, and then we have to do that because we haven't pushed the develop there. And then as a sanity check, I'm going to bring up git extensions just to make sure that all of my ducks are in a row. which there's the upstream master. Yeah, I had a feeling that my upstream develop didn't have those pushed. I had a feeling that I hadn't pushed it there. So let's push those to there as well, so that everything is in a row. So let's do a refresh here, and we should see that everything is in line. Okay, good. So now we just need to wait for those CIs to finish, and if those CIs finish, we can click the go button on the release, and we will have another release today, this lunchtime, for Cake.VsCode. So hopefully that will keep Maurice in the chat room happy, because I know he was looking for this one to be updated. So let's go back to our CIs, which are over here. That's not what I want to do. Onto the history. And it's projects. We're not on Cake.Gitter anymore. We are on Cake.VsCode. And we'll see where we get to. I might actually cheat a little bit. I'm going to cancel that develop build on the develop branch, just so that the next tagged release doesn't have to wait, so we can get this done before I can go and grab some lunch. So if this build succeeds, we can then go in here and press the big green button, and that will push it out the door. So, any questions from anyone in the chat room regarding the process that I'm following here, why we're having to do this, any questions about Cake.Recipe, any questions about anything really, feel free to ask. I'm going to put a tick in this box so that I know I've done it. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got another 8 add-ins that I need to do. So at this rate, that's another 4 Friday lunchtimes, I guess. But I may do some in my spare time as well. So it might not be the sole focus of the streams here. What are you going to have for lunch? That's a great question. I don't know. I'll go inside and see what there is. There's no one in the house today, so I'm fending for myself. So I'm going to need to see what's left. Is about the stretch of it. Where do we get to? We're running the tests. Got about 4 minutes left. Here we go. So we're getting near the end of the build now. It is publishing some documentation because it's on the master branch. It has some documentation that it wants to push out, and it's uploading the code coverage report to coveralls.io so that we can keep a track of whether our unit test coverage is going up or down. So, and then that build succeeded, I think. Should go green. Should go green. It went green. Okay, good. So let's go ahead and publish that. And that will kick off another build for Cake.VsCode, and that will push out that add-in to NuGet in the same way that it did for Cake.Gitter. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to say that is all for today. Monday night stream should be happening. He's not in the chat room. He said he might be in, but he's not made it in yet. So Matthias and I believe, are going to be continuing the changes to the Cake website infrastructure to move some more things over to Azure in a different way, so that the current cycle for updating the website is quite long. So the idea behind the changes that Matthias is suggesting is to improve the speed of that deployment to Azure. It's already made a difference in terms of the changes that have been made, but there's still some additional changes that we can make to improve that process even more. So that's going to be the topic for Monday night stream. Next Friday stream, this time next week, will likely be more of this, which is updating add-ins and bringing everything into line. And then once all that work's done, I'm going to start to figure out what we're going to do going forward for Friday lunchtime session. So the shorter session where we're kind of got to pull in, squeeze in a little bit more content. So I'm going to leave this running. But for now, thank you very much for joining me on this lunch hour. I will hopefully talk to you all soon, and have fun. Thank you very much.